Every culture that gave humanity knowledge was punished for it. Prometheus, chained to a rock for eternity. Odin, hung from a tree for 9 days, pierced by his own spear. Different cultures, different millennia, different names, same punishment, same crime. And the crime, in every single case, was the same. They gave us something we weren't supposed to have. Tonight, what that something was, and why every tradition agrees it had to be taken back. Let me start with the oldest tradition we have, because the Sumerian version of this story is the one that sets the pattern everything else follows. Enki is the god of wisdom, water, and creation. He holds the May, the divine decrees, the gifts of civilization. Every element of organized human life, writing, music, kingship, truth, the arts of the craftsman. Enki guards them, and Enki gives them. The tension in the Sumerian texts is consistent. Enlil, the authority, the law, the one who decides what humanity deserves, does not want humanity to have the May. Enki gives them anyway, quietly, repeatedly, against divine authority. The specific story is the myth of Inanna and the May. The goddess Inanna travels to Enki's domain, the Abziu, the underground freshwater ocean, and acquires the May through a feast at which Enki drinks too much and gives them away. When he sobers up and tries to reclaim them, it's too late. Inanna has already given them to humanity, a god giving away divine decrees while drunk at a feast. I almost dismissed it, but the structure is identical to what comes later in every other tradition, a divine being who holds something humanity needs, a moment of transgression, the gift given, the authority violated, the consequences that follow. Why does this matter? Because the Sumerian texts are the oldest written record on Earth. The oldest story humanity ever wrote down is not a creation myth. It is a god who gave to civilization itself against the wishes of the authority that governed the cosmos. The May are at the center of that conflict. The forbidden knowledge of the Sumerian tradition is not one thing, it is everything, civilization itself. The Egyptian version of this story adds something the Sumerian one doesn't. The knowledge has a location, and it was deliberately hidden. Thoth is the Egyptian god of wisdom, writing, and knowledge. He is the scribe of the gods, the keeper of divine secrets, the one who records everything and forgets nothing. And according to the ancient Egyptian tradition, Thoth wrote it all down. The books of Thoth, referenced across multiple Egyptian texts, are described as containing the complete knowledge of the universe, the secrets of the gods, the magic that governs creation, the movements of the stars, the nature of the divine realm, everything. And they were hidden, not destroyed, hidden. The tradition is specific about this. The books of Thoth were sealed in a box, inside another box, inside another box, each box guarded by serpents and scorpions, and sunk to the bottom of the Nile, or locked in a tomb, or sealed in a sanctuary that no mortal could approach. The Greco-Roman tradition inherited this. The Hermetic texts of the 1st and 2nd centuries AD are attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, Hermes the Thrice Great, a synthesis of the Greek Hermes and the Egyptian Thoth. The Hermetic tradition claims to be the survival of exactly these hidden books. What is in them? The texts that survive from the Hermetic tradition describe the nature of God, the structure of the cosmos, the relationship between the divine and the human, not practical magic. Cosmic architecture, the knowledge of how everything works. The Hermetic tradition did not disappear. It went underground. It survived in medieval manuscripts, in Renaissance scholars who built the foundations of modern science, in the esoteric traditions that fed the Enlightenment. The knowledge that was supposedly sunk to the bottom of the Nile is still circulating, still being studied, still considered dangerous enough by certain institutions to have been suppressed for centuries. The tradition is consistent on one point. This knowledge was given to humanity by a divine figure, and then it was taken back, hidden, because humanity was not ready for it, or because something else decided we shouldn't have it. The Greek version of this story is the one most people think they know, and it's more complicated than the myth. The Greek tradition is the most familiar version of this story in Western culture, and it is worth reading more carefully than most people do. Prometheus is a titan, one of the older divine generation, who steals fire from the gods and gives it to humanity. Zeus punishes him. Chained to a rock, an eagle tears at him daily, for eternity. But fire is not the whole story. The later tradition, Aeschylus, Plato, gives Prometheus a much broader role. He gave humanity not just fire but all the arts of civilization, medicine, navigation, metalworking, mathematics, the blind hope that prevents humans from knowing the moment of their death. That last one, blind hope, the gift of not knowing when you will die. Prometheus didn't just give humanity tools. He gave humanity the psychological capacity to live. And for that, Zeus chained him to a rock for eternity. The Norse tradition adds something unexpected. Odin, the All-Father, the chief of the Aesir, the most powerful being in the Norse cosmos, acquires the runes through self-sacrifice. He hangs himself from Yggdrasil, the world tree, for 9 days, pierced by his own spear, looking down into the waters below, receiving no food, no water, for 9 days. And then the runes reveal themselves to him. The runes are not just letters. In the Norse tradition, they are the fundamental forces of existence, the patterns underlying reality itself. Odin acquires cosmic knowledge through an ordeal of self-destruction. He suffers to receive what could not otherwise be given. And here is the structural parallel I cannot dismiss. Prometheus suffers a punishment imposed by divine authority for giving knowledge to humanity. Odin imposes the punishment on himself to acquire the knowledge in the first place. Two different structures, but both saying the same thing. Cosmic knowledge costs something. It always costs something. And authority, whether external or internal, demands the price be paid. These are not related traditions. Greece and Scandinavia developed independently. There was no cultural pipeline between them that explains this parallel. Two separate civilizations, separated by centuries and thousands of miles, both arrived at the same conclusion, that cosmic knowledge is withheld by default, that receiving it requires a price, and that the entity deciding whether you get it is not neutral. The Hebrew version is the one that sits inside the tradition most viewers grew up with, and it's the one where the punishment falls not on the giver but on the receiver. The Hebrew tradition gives us two versions of the forbidden knowledge story, and they are very different. The first is Genesis, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The serpent, who in the oldest readings is not Satan but a wise creature, the craftiest of the beasts of the field, tells Eve that eating the fruit will make her like God, knowing good and evil. She eats, Adam eats. And the consequence is not death, at least not immediately. The consequence is awareness. The knowledge they received is the knowledge of their own condition, mortality, shame, the awareness of the gap between what they are and what they were made to be. This is not a gift of civilization like Enki's May. It is a different kind of knowing, an existential shift. They can no longer be in the garden because they are no longer innocent enough to inhabit it. And the divine response is not just punishment. It is prevention. God places cherubim with a flaming sword to guard the tree of life. The knowledge of good and evil has been received. The tree of life must now be withheld. The second Hebrew version is the Watchers from the Book of Enoch. 200 divine beings descend. They teach humanity metalworking, astronomy, the movements of stars, the making of weapons, the art of cosmetics and enchantment. Their leader is Samyaza. The instigator of the teaching is Azazel, and the punishment falls not on the humans who received the knowledge, but on the divine beings who gave it. The Watchers are bound in darkness beneath the earth until the final judgment. The structural parallel with Prometheus is exact. A divine being gives humanity knowledge it wasn't supposed to have. The divine authority responds with eternal punishment for the giver. The knowledge remains in the world, humanity has it, but the one who gave it pays the price. Genesis and the Book of Enoch are both Hebrew texts, and they tell the same forbidden knowledge story twice with different mechanics. In Genesis, the knowledge changes what humanity is. In Enoch, the knowledge changes what humanity can do. One is existential, one is technological. Together, they cover everything. The tradition didn't just record one version of the theft, it recorded both. 5 traditions, 5 givers, 5 punishments. The knowledge stays. The giver suffers. Enki, Thoth, Prometheus, Odin, the Watchers. The knowledge stays in the world. The giver always pays. The honest position on what this pattern means is the hardest question the evidence opens. I want to share 3 honest positions before the closing. The knowledge is still here, encoded in the stories, hidden in plain sight in the oldest texts on Earth. The first position: this is comparative mythology doing what comparative mythology does. Every culture has a trickster figure. Every culture has a flood story. Every culture has a paradise lost. The forbidden knowledge story belongs to this category. A universal human narrative about the cost of growing up, the loss of innocence, the gap between what we know and what we can handle. It is the hero's journey applied to civilization itself. The second position: the pattern reflects a historical reality. At some point in the deep past, a body of knowledge, astronomical, metallurgical, mathematical, was transmitted to early human communities from a source the communities understood as divine or superhuman. The punishment traditions record the political and theological response of the authority structures that felt threatened by that transmission. The knowledge came from somewhere. The authority tried to suppress it. The third position is the one I find hardest to state cleanly, because it requires a step the evidence does not fully support. What if the pattern is not a metaphor and not a memory, but a report? What if the 5 traditions are independently recording actual events? Beings who gave humanity something, beings who were punished for it, and a divine authority structure that has been trying across every culture and every millennium to take it back. I can't tell you which of these positions is correct. The evidence supports all 3 with varying degrees of plausibility. What I can tell you is this: 5 completely independent civilizations, Sumerian, Egyptian, Greek, Norse, Hebrew, produced the same story, the same structure, the same crime, the same punishment, the same outcome. Either that convergence is the most widespread coincidence in human cultural history, or something happened, something that every culture remembered, in its own language, under its own names. And whatever it was, the authority that punished the giver has been trying to suppress the memory of it ever since. The question Season 2 keeps asking is, what does the pattern mean? Thanks for watching Unburied Remnants. If you like the content, please like, comment, and subscribe to help support the channel. Stay curious. Keep digging. The rabbit hole goes deeper.